אוקיי.
יופי, אז אני רק באמת בוקר טוב לכולם, ותודה שהצטרפתם. סליחה ככה על התקלה הטכנית, אני מקווה שאנחנו צלחנו אותה. אנחנו נרגשים היום לארח את דבי ציוני שלנו, שהיא בעצם דור שני לניצולי שואה, ואת אימה היקרה אדינה אגנס שווימר, שיושבת כאן לצידה. דבי תחלוק איתנו, לא יודעת מי ככה מכם היה שנה שעברה ושמע את חלקו של הסיפור של אביה, אז דבי היום תחלוק איתנו את הסיפור של אביה, זיכרונו לברכה, ואימה היקרה אדינה הסכימה לשתף אותנו גם בסיפור האישי שלה מהמלחמה, ובעצם אנחנו ככה רוצים להודות לכם מקרב לב, לאימה של דבי, לדבי, למשפחה שלה, שהצטרפתם היום ועל השיתוף האישי שלכם, ושאתם בחרתם לחלוק איתנו את הסיפור האישי שלכם ושל המשפחה שלכם. בסוף העדות אנחנו ניתן גם זמן לשאלות ולתשובות, אז למי מכם שיש שאלה, אז אתם מוזמנים לכתוב במהלך העדות, ואנחנו נשאל את כל השאלות ממש בסיום העדות של דבי. דבי, אדינה, אנחנו שמחים שאתם איתנו היום במיוחד, והבמה היא שלכם.
תודה רבה. Okay. So last year, some of you might have heard as Lee told you about a bit about my father's story. This is my mother, Adina Agnes Schwimmer, an Auschwitz survivor. I'm a second generation, which is a whole story in itself. My parents were both born in Czechoslovakia. Sorry. My parents were both born in Czechoslovakia. My father was in other camps. He was in Bergen-Belsen and in Wolfsburg, and he ended up in Auschwitz. And my mother was taken to Auschwitz directly. After their liberation, they were both in DP camps. And I said, what's a DP camp? I thought it was a Machanat Kayitz when I was a little girl. A DP camp was displaced persons with no money, no family, no nothing, just lost, completely lost in this world until they got to the United States. That's a whole story in itself, which I hope my mother will have time to tell a little bit about. My parents lived in Brooklyn, New York. They both came to New York. My mother went to Minnesota after she arrived in New York to be with a foster family, and afterwards wound up in New York with my father in Brooklyn. They retired to Miami, and then they came to Israel a couple of years ago. So today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Every day is Holocaust Remembrance Day for me. There is not a day that goes by in my life that I'm not reminded of my entire family that was and that was denied. The picture here says 1,000 words. This is my youngest granddaughter, Darlie. And my mother, actually I caught her with her finger pointing and her tattoo number, A5793, explaining to Darlie about what happened to her, not in gory details, but enough for her to understand that because she was Jewish, her parents went through atrocities and were taken away and murdered. The picture on the right shows my grandfather and my grandmother. It's a whole story also how these pictures were obtained. This is my mother's father, Isaac. He was one of 9 brothers. 8 of them were brothers, yes. 8 of them were murdered in, girls too, brothers and sisters were murdered in Auschwitz. One brother, Meyer Bear, actually got away. He left before the whole mess, and actually he's Ari Sprung's grandfather, Meyer Bear Birnbaum, so there's a little relation in here. And I never had any grandparents. I didn't even know what grandparents were until I went to school and I had friends that had grandparents. I thought, I didn't know it was not normal. Okay, today's talk, אני אדבר קצת בעברית גם כן, אני רק הסברתי שאני דור שני, והיה לי מאוד קשה להבין מה נורמלי ולא נורמלי. אני לא הבנתי מה זה סבא וסבתא עד שהגעתי לבית ספר, והיו לי חברים שהיו להם סבים וסבתות, והאימא שלי הראתה את התמונה, והיא מדברת עם כל ילד שיכול להבין מה זה שואה ואיך היא נלקחה מהבית שלה, ואיך שהרסו את כל המשפחה והחיים ושהם נשמדו. My mother is an Auschwitz survivor. There are very few that are left today. And there's an Auschwitz album. The Auschwitz album is the only survival visual evidence of the process of the mass murder at Auschwitz-Birkenau.
A certain area only. From an area in the Carpathian, a small town, and all the people from that town. It wasn't an international thing.
It was just, okay, so it depicts, I'm going to mention that also, it depicts the entire process from the victim's arrival until their disposal, to the disposal of their belongings. The only thing that is not pictured is their actual murder. The people in the photo were Jews deported to the camp in the later part of May 1944. This is an extraordinary album. I don't know if many of you have heard of it or even seen it. We don't know what the purpose of these pictures were, whether they were for propaganda or to document them. The Germans just documented the camp. Okay, I just wanted to add what my mother just said, that many were from the Subcarpathian Russia region, which today is the Ukraine. And before 1939, when my parents were born, it was part of the Czechoslovakian Republic, so my parents are both Czech. In 1939, it was taken over by Hungary, which was then a German ally. And in 1944, the Germans occupied Hungary, and in April, they forced all the Jews into ghettos. Between May and July, they deported most of these Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Originally, the train stopped a half a mile from Auschwitz, and the people had to walk the half mile, hungered after train rides of disaster, of starvation. And in the spring of 1944, they actually built the railroad ramp, the famous railroad that goes straight into the gates of Auschwitz, right into the camp. And the selection was taken, the selection of people who to live and who to die were taken right as soon as the train pulled in. Between 1940 and 1945, 1.1 million people were murdered in Auschwitz. Nearly 90% of them were Jews. This is a short video about the Auschwitz album.
Auschwitz-Birkenau was the largest extermination center created by the Nazis. It has become the symbol of the Holocaust and of willful, radical evil in our time. The album you will see presented here is known as the Auschwitz Album, and it is the only surviving visual evidence of the process of mass murder at Auschwitz-Birkenau. The album is unique. There is not a similar album of its kind in the entire world. It documents in photos from every direction and from every angle the arrival at Auschwitz, the selection of those slated for immediate death and of the few who were destined to be slave laborers, the confiscation of their property, and the preparation for the physical annihilation of a transport of Jewish people. This transport of Hungarian Jews from the area of Carpatho, Ruthenia, arrived at the ramp of the extermination camp Auschwitz-Birkenau in May 1944. In the photos, we see the men, women, and children step out of the overcrowded train, traumatized and fearful after their horrendous journey. They have no clue that they have just been delivered to a death factory, and that few of them will survive. Survivor and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Elie Wiesel described his arrival as a teenager at Auschwitz. Every yard or so, an SS man held his gun trained on us. Hand in hand, we followed the crowd. Men to the left, women to the right. 8 words spoken indifferently, without emotion. 8 short, simple words. For a part of a second, I glimpsed my mother and my sister moving to the right. I saw them disappear into the distance, while I walked on with my father and the other men. I did not know that at that place, at that moment, I was parting from my mother and my sister forever. The selection process carried out by SS doctors and wardens took place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as train after train unloaded its human cargo. Most Jews were sent immediately to the left, to their death. The undressing rooms of the gas chambers were not sufficient for the masses of Hungarian Jews who arrived daily in the summer of 1944. They therefore had to wait until the undressing rooms were ready to absorb them. The common waiting place was the grove closest to the crematorium that would soon turn their bodies to ash. They were told to sit among the trees and wait for further instructions. These were their last peaceful moments together before being driven into the gas chambers and murdered. It has been said that there will never be people as innocent as the victims on the threshold of the gas chambers. The SS kept the victims destined for gassing in complete ignorance of what lay in store for them. They were told that before being placed in the camp, they had to be disinfected and washed. They would soon discover that what they had assumed were the shower areas were actually hermetically sealed gas chambers. A minority of Jews was selected for forced labor. Their personal belongings were confiscated, their hair was shaved, and a registration number was tattooed on their left arm. In the words of survivor and author Primo Levi, for the first time we became aware that our language lacks words to express this offense, the demolition of a man. It is not possible to sink lower than this. Nothing belongs to us anymore. They have taken away our clothes, our shoes, even our hair. If we speak strength to do so. It is in this way that one can understand the double sense of the term extermination camp. The work of sorting the possessions that the Jews brought with them to Auschwitz was done by Jewish prisoners who were forced to collect the packages and sort the items that would then be sent to the Reich. By the time the sorting was completed, most of the previous owners were already dead. No memory of the men, women, and children that were deemed valueless upon their arrival remains in camp records. This album is the sole witness to their fate. The Auschwitz Album was discovered after the war by Lily Jacob, a survivor of the transports pictured here. Lily gave the album to Yad Vashem, where she knew that its tragic contents would be safeguarded for posterity and shared with generations to come. Auschwitz-Birkenau was the largest extermination center.
So that was the story of the Auschwitz Album. If you noticed, my mother was pointing there. That's me. That's my family. That's what they've done to us. The Auschwitz Album shows about 193 pictures of the arrival at Auschwitz, the selection of people who would live, who would die, who would work, who would go to the Canada area. My mother will speak about that in a few minutes, and the last moments before the gas chambers. My mother is one of those few survivors here, and Mom brings me to tears, but we've heard this story so many times. My mom's going to tell her story now.
I didn't hear it, I lived it.
Yes, my mother lived it. You could just speak up so people can hear you. My mother just didn't hear the story. She lived the story. And I think we'll give my mother the floor right now. If you see, this picture is from the Auschwitz Album.
These are all my cousins, first cousins, second cousins, very few other neighbors also, and this entire line, we were all a group that arrived together and stayed together almost till the evacuation of the camp.
And these were the young girls that were fit to work. But we'll talk about the arrival and about your family. And we'll just leave the picture here. So, Mommy, just tell us, please, what happened? When did this happen? You lived in Czechoslovakia. When did they take you away? And how did they take you away?
It was the last day of Pesach. My father, mother, And my little brother and I sat in one room which was darkened by black curtains. There was supposed to be no light shining out of the house. When our neighbor knocked on the door, not a Jewish lady who was the owner of a restaurant, came into the house, and she looked very sad and agitated and said, "I came to warn you. There'll be here in the morning a Hungarian soldier or gendarme will come and direct you out of the house. And if you want me to take care of some papers or valuables, you can give them to me and I'll save them to you, because you're going to leave and I don't know when or how you will come back." And it happened just like that. In the morning, there was a knock on the door, and a big Hungarian gendarme came in with fuzz in his hair, who a day before still used to greet the Jewish people, not with kind words, but talk to them. He just pointed out everybody. And then he warned us we should go into the house and push every piece of furniture into one corner in one room and get ready to leave the house without any package or I get confused. Not to take along anything with us, just one change of clothes. And that had to be done so fast because he was holding the gun and fast, move, so that in a very short time we were outside. And we saw that all the people who lived in the same house, our tenants, had to do sing and march out of the garden and the yard and stand on the street, joined by other people from other houses, ready to march. It didn't take minutes that this happened, after another, and we were already marching there to the synagogue. They collected all the Jewish people they could place in the synagogue, searched us again. Most of them had to undress, and then left us in the synagogue like sardines. We stayed one night over. In the morning, everybody close, aroused, quickly out, and we lined us up and we marched there to the station. In the station, they had cattle wagons ready, opened, and told us to get in the wagons, pushed us, until we were all like sardines standing in the wagons. Wagons were closed, and in a few minutes, they started going.
And women, the old people, the young people?
Everybody together. We were riding the train maybe half an hour. I can tell the time because I went every day to school from my town to Munkacs, and this was the ride we took, and stopped in the station in Munkacs. It didn't take long. In Munkacs, we were staying in a brick fabric. No. I'm a little confused. Yes, in Munkacs we stopped, and through the cracks of the
train?
The brick.
The building?
No. In the train, we were in the train, but through the cracks we could look out and see that we are in the other brick factory, and there are lots of people in front already looking at our train. And this was the Munkacs people that I went to school, and I recognized most of them stood there, and they didn't know what's happening either. They saw our train stood there. I don't know why they kept us there. Maybe another train was joining, or we couldn't see what's going on, but our train started to go. Where, what, we didn't know. we asked, the German had one answer, you're going to work somewhere and it's going to be all right. And so we rode 3 days and 3 nights like sardines in a cattle wagon. There's no outlet for
No outlets,
for
bathrooms, no.
bathrooms, no food. And we rode 3 days and 3 nights, and we arrived in Auschwitz. As soon as the train stopped, it didn't take minutes. They opened the doors and started arouse, so that the train was in 10 minutes empty.
Arouse means out.
Out. And already there were down there workers, which were Jewish dressed in the uniforms. They must have been there already years, and started helping to arrange us into lines. First it was 2 lines, men separate, women separate. Then they made 4 lines because the women were separated. Mengele was a doctor in front. We found out his name is Mengele. White gloves and a stick in his hand pointing, you go here and you go here, so that again 2 lines formed. Elderly people, young people. In other words, he was selecting who should go to one side and who should go to other side. Now, my mother was a young woman, so she came with me to the young side, but he saw it and he said, she can stay, but she has to leave the little boy. My brother was 6 years old. And my mother wouldn't leave him, so it made her also go to the other side. And so there was a whole transport of us to one side, and the mothers and old ladies and children on the other side. And as soon as it was finished, the selection, came a soldier with a gun, march, we're going. And it started to be already night.
1 minute, Mommy, this was the last time your mother went one way and you went the other way.
We were first going away, and then the others also went because another train was already.
Okay, but let's just talk about, this was the selection when you got there. You were separated from your mother and your younger brother and your father. They separated
and
the
all
families.
the cousins,
And all the cousins.
whoever got into that wagon. There
Okay.
was a whole train.
The only ones that were on the selection side to the left or the right, whichever way it was, were the ones that were fit to work. They took the young people. My mother was in her teens, her relatives, her cousins were in her teens. But all
We
the,
didn't know that.
you didn't know that, but that's what they did. They separated the,
I said, you'll see your mother later.
they said, you'll see your mother later.
Not the Germans,
The Jews.
The Jews who were there knew what's going on. But there was details in the trip because my father and his 4 brothers and brother-in-laws, were ill. My grandfather died when we were put into the train, and they left him there in the brick factory. So we had to leave him there, but there were cousins in Munkac who were not taken yet, and they saw what's happening. So they took the grandfather out after we left and buried him still in Munkac. Then later they took to, but I get a little mixed up where I am.
You were selected.
Yeah, but I still saw my father forget his brothers walking because one was old and one was sickly.
Your father was not ill. Your father was healthy.
My father was the healthiest of them all, and he was taking care of these brothers. And he said to the men, they cannot walk, no way. You know, one had his feet swollen. So he said, don't worry, we'll get them transportation. And there was a truck who was going around, and he right away brought the truck and got them on the truck, my father and his 3 brothers and brother-in-law, and they were the first ones to go. That's one thing that I remember. I was still alive there when the truck went. And so, where did I leave off? We were marching, the selected ones. And it was night, and there was a terrible smell and smoke. You could hardly see, and you see fire flame on top too. And we sat down on the floor, our group, and said, we are not going. And they coaxed us, don't be afraid, you will be just disinfected and so and so. Is there one of you who's brave enough to come and we'll show her and then she'll come back and tell you it's no danger? And so on. My cousin spoke German well, went with the man, he took her to the bath where there is the disinfectant, didn't show her the whole thing, just that there are women going through a little bath. And she came back and she said, it looks like they are disinfecting. And don't worry, the girls are standing waiting in line to be disinfected. We had to go through a little basin with water.
1 minute, just 1 minute. Before they put you in the showers, you had no clothing. They gave you something to wear.
This was after this disinfectant. We still went through.
They shaved your.
That has a lot of showers. But before we did that, I stood there, and there were little windows in the room where the bath was. And I cried, and I cried, and then this Greek man came over to me, a Jewish man who worked there, and said, "Was feinste?" So I said, "Ich weiß nicht wie my mama is." He took me there very close and said, "What do you see? Was este?" And I saw a big fire. He said, "You should know this is your mother burning there. And if you ever come out of this hell, you should remember 7 days before Shavuot, light a candle, because that's what I did to your mother." And that was the first real realization that this is not good. We are not in the right place. That something very bad is coming after this trip. And then they took us into a shower, a lot of shower heads. We were about 100 or more. And they played with the showers, hot, cold, what. It was over. They gave us one dress, cut our hair. The numbers came later, as I remember. And marched us to the room again, and we stood till the morning. Then they lined us up and marched. We marched through a camp. This bathhouse, this happened, was one side the bathhouse, and a little further was the crematorium, and in between was a barrack on the other side of the bathhouse.
What was in the barrack?
One barrack, we didn't know. 2 barracks. And we didn't look there, what is this there? We had to march. And we marched to Lager C, and that was temporary for 2 or 3 weeks. We had to march there because the barracks near the bath was, I don't know if they were built or they were emptied, because it wasn't clear for me. Now after this war, I cannot separate what was first. So I was in the Zeelager marching in 4 o'clock in the morning. Heraus, 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 everybody out, line up in 5, without clothes, without everything, standing naked. About an hour before 4 Germans or 5 came, big shots, and looked us over. Tried to pick out 1 or 2 that they didn't like. And then they sent us back. We put on the dress and we marched back near the crematorium were two barracks. Between the two barracks was like a yard and a road. They marched us there into a room and brought behind the two lines facing each other. We were two lines, clothes, a lot of clothes almost up to the ceiling. Then they gave us an order to take a dress. I don't remember on what we put the dress. Straighten it nicely out and get another dress until you have 10. Then you tie the bundle and put it on the other side.
So, woman, Mommy, this was your job in Auschwitz, working near the crematorium, taking the clothes that they took off the dead people, folding them into parcels and preparing them.
Yeah.
And this was in an area you mentioned once before that was called Canada, or was that something else?
Yeah, they called Canada because we had available the packages and we could choose something and we could eat something what we found in packets, but all without showing, if you were caught, you were punished. So we had food there. Later we found out. In the beginning, we didn't dare move. We just did what we were told because there was a couple in every room with a stick, and if you stopped for a minute, you got it. And so we spent this before they gave us breakfast. What did they give? They gave us a bowl we should have and poured in black coffee. And we were not aware, but they put something in it. We found out later it was some medication.
It was medication to stop the hormones.
Rome or something. And so we worked a few weeks and then to the other camp to sleep, back and forth. So we didn't know what's going to happen. Day to day, every morning we had to stand hours for lapel and
for a countdown.
And then we were dressed and given this little coffee. Sometimes once a day they gave a piece of bread, which was like when you cut wood, the dust.
Like sandpaper.
Not sandpaper, like wood.
Oh.
Mixed with, we drank it, there was no bread. And then we went to work. Now these two barracks where we worked, one side was the baths where the people went when they arrived. The other side, about 20 meters, was the crematorium.
The chimneys.
And between us was the road where they arrived, where they were separated and who was where. So every day we saw what's going on. The transports are coming, people we know sometimes from other countries, they all passed there, and there was the crematorium. The rest, I don't know what they did with, because there were lines. And the crematorium didn't stop day and night, smoking and burning and smelling, and we were working. And every day the same. You got up 4 o'clock, you stood till lapel, rain or shine or snow, nothing mattered. Many of us didn't make it, but it was a strong group. That's why we were selected.
Mommy, let me just ask you, after months of working like this in Auschwitz, how did you finally get out? Because our time is a little limited.
I just want to say one thing. They saw that we were crying. Every time someone came, they put blankets around us. We shouldn't see. How it ended? It
never ended, but
ended at the crematoriums. The one next to us exploded, and no transport were coming after that.
Exploded by who? Somebody bombed it.
Inside, the boys inside exploded it from inside, and they came out one by one. We were still there because it was burning in the crematorium. And then there were no more transport, and I don't remember how long we stayed after that. But then they evacuated Auschwitz out. We had to go out with a little blanket on us, and we joined the march from all Auschwitz.
This was the death march. They were trying to get you to walk
And-
hungered.
But they didn't have crematoriums working anymore, and it was quiet. You could hear the front is not very far. And they put us in a march, and we marched like it would never stop. Many people, if you couldn't march, you got shot in the head. And we marched, thousands of us. We stopped for the night sometimes. I can't talk anymore.
Okay, just a minute, Mommy, I'm sorry. It's very hard for my mother. But finally, when my mother, the march was marching and marching, and then finally my mother somehow slid out of the march.
There was no more march. There were just a few people. Germans had, they went away at the end. You couldn't see a German. And I was lucky because a French laborer who worked for the Germans heard me. I was sitting in the rain there crying.
My mother crouched under a bridge.
So he took me from under a little bridge. I was hiding from the rain, and put me in a barn, covered me with hay, and said, just be quiet, don't move. And I was in that barn 2 or 3 days, and through the cracks, I looked out, and there was a commotion on the street. People, jeeps, noise, but not bad noise, you know. So I rolled out slowly there, and I came and I see Russian soldiers. I didn't know Russian, I just knew soldiers, tall ones, with round guns. They had guns on their shoulder that had like a, and they looked at me and they said, "Что такое? What is this?" So I said, "I'm Cheska." I was afraid to say I'm a Jew. Cheska. Oh, Cheska. They took me into the room of the German woman who was not kind and said, wash her. Meanwhile, 2 other girls came out of the woods and joined. 3 of us went into the house and washed us. She washed us and cleaned us and gave us food because the German came to check always, the Russian, and she was doing everything. And so we were there a few days. Then the Russian transport had to move on. So we talked because I talk Czech and he talks Russian. He was from Uzbekistan someplace. And he said, "Davai, they will take us with them." And we sat on a truck with them 3 days, stopping overnight in a German house. They chased out the Germans and let us sleep in the beds. And then after 3 days, we came to a halt. Now, they said, "Now come out, stand here." And they said, "Bend down and kiss the ground. You are home. This is Czechia." And we did that. They were very nice to us. And that's the end of Auschwitz.
The end of Auschwitz, but just the beginning of a lot of horrible other things that happened. But my mother was a very lucky lady, and she met the right people, and she knew the right languages. She had a little bit of English and a little bit of Hebrew. And my mother always found herself getting these positions with the UNRWA. You could say how you met some German, a nice person.
That was already much later.
There were good people all around. After my mother went back to Czechoslovakia, to where her hometown was,
Didn't find anything.
she didn't find anything.
Went back to Germany and worked for the UNRWA, but not long.
Uh-huh.
And then I had a chance to go to America without any
No, but you can tell the story about now. I just realized we have a little more time about what happened is after you got that French person took you in his arms.
That was still Auschwitz. I mean, you still felt like Auschwitz. He was the one who put me in the barn. And from the barn, the Russians were very kind to us. And then when we kissed the ground, the Czechs were looking already because we were the first ones to arrive from Auschwitz to Czechia. This was not Prague, this was Lužine.
So how did you wind up getting all these nice positions? I mean, you're very likable and sweet, but no. So after you got home, then what did you do?
Cried.
You cried.
I went home and the house was absolutely empty. The flowers, the gardens were blooming. I was all alone there. I said, that's not for me. I went to Munkac, which was a bigger town, found already people I knew, and I went to school there. I went to Hebrew Gymnasium in Munkac. And from there, we went to Budapest. No, I wasn't yet in Budapest. I was still with the friends. In Budapest, the Joint gave papers to people, and that's where I went up to the floor to stand online, and I met my brother. He came in.
By chance.
My brother saw the girls downstairs and said, what do you know about my sister Agi? She's on the third floor. He didn't know I'm alive even. So he ran up and took me to him. He was at the university in Debrecen, gave it up. After I lived with him a week or so, he kept on feeding me. And then this is already a story where civilization was creeping in, you know. You could sleep in a bed and you could eat and make plans. And so I was with my brother a short while, and then I was going home, and I came home and there was nothing there. Then I stayed in Budapest with cousins for a short while. And then came an order that they're going to close the borders from Budapest to Germany. So my brother said, we're not staying in Budapest, we're getting out, and we got in a train again. This normally already, but still a freight train. It was for the people who want to leave quickly because they're closed the border from Budapest to Germany, to Austria. And we got in a train, and our luck, we sat on the train because Austria didn't let in right. Then we got out in Austria. We all ran for the public baths, and they put us back in the train to Germany. We arrived in Germany, in Hasenheck, which I never heard of in my life. And there, a military barrack was emptied. We all got, how do you say it, apartments. So my brother got an apartment, and I stayed with them a while. And then my brother was picked out because he was fluent in English. And they took him across the border, not a German border, and gave him a job to be the director of a DP camp.
Displaced persons camp.
Displaced person. And they had little houses there, and so I moved in with my brother and looked what to do. Because of my language ability, that I knew German and I knew a little English. There was an English class in the gymnasium, and my father was an American citizen, so I had connections with him when he was not home. So my English was passable. The UNRWA director who worked with us,
United Nations Relief Association, picked you out?
Picked our family out and said, you know a little English, come, you will work in the UNRWA, and gave me a little office and said, all you have to do is distribute mail for the officers that are in this building. And if somebody needs a jeep, you will write him a permission to get one. And I had that job like in heaven. I can move. I could go into offices, deliver mail. I delivered mail for big offices, general clerks, mail I found. And one day, Schwartz was the director of UNRWA, Mordechai Schwartz. He said, around 10 o'clock, bring me some letters. You'll have a surprise. Don't stay long, just come in and put down the letters, and that's it. And I did that, and I come in, and Eisenhower and Mamie sit in the office with him. Said good morning and walked out. So I had the privilege to see them for a minute. But I heard in the UNRWA saying that President Truman is giving permission for 20 young people to come to America without any papers, with any...
Carte blanche, free. Nothing, no proof of anything, of where you're coming from.
And so we collected 20 young people. I went to Frankfurt because there was a camp with my friends also. And there was a rabbi in charge. He was from the UNRWA, a Canadian gentleman. And I said, I need a paper that I can go on the trip. I have to be under 20 years old. Without hesitation, gave me the paper. And so I went to, I don't remember, Hamburg.
You noticed my mother was talking about I went to Frankfurt, I went to Hamburg. There was like no speed trains. There were no, fast ways to get there. This took days to travel.
Yeah,
it was.
Who worked in these places had a chance to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Well, you didn't mention also that General Eisenhower came.
He was there in the office. I saw him. He came to talk about what to do with all these refugees.
So you got into the 20 girls group to come to America?
Not
girls. 20 teens.
Teens. We sat in Hamburg about 10 days, I would say. And this Mordechai Schwartz, the head of the UNRWA there, came with another UNRWA worker to see everything should be all right. Then one day said, get ready. We were all in a school. We said, get ready. We are leaving today. And then we go out and we see a huge, huge ship called Ernie Pyle, a military transport ship. We got in, got food, everything, and that's how I arrived to America.
I think we're going to just stop this right now. There's a lot of stories that we want to continue.
I just want to say one more thing. When we were in America, and I was very surprised, I saw colored people. That was the first time in my life. And there were stores, and I went in, and I said, I want to buy an orange. And the man said, yeah. I said, I want to buy an orange. And I had money already. So he said, what kind of orange? For juice? It was, I didn't know how to get juice. I didn't understand. I said, here too they sell for juice different oranges. And that was my American introduction to shopping. And I stayed there, and then by luck, some people came and gave us a choice what we want to do in America. Some people had relatives, some wanted to work. They asked me and my friend, what would you like to do? And I said, we would like to study and finish our schooling. I'll try to help you. And they connected with St. Paul in
Minnesota.
Two other agencies in Minnesota never had refugees yet. And they were happy to accept two young refugees.
I just might mention that my mother was a teacher in the ghetto before they took everybody away.
Teacher.
And she had,
there was no teacher.
No teaching.
I collected the little ones and I kept them busy.
Okay, well, we'll call it that. And my mother was in Minnesota studying at McAllister College. There was no internet in those days, but we actually found records of her attendance over there. And then afterwards, she met my father through relatives in the family and came back to New York, and they got married in New York. And my mother continued teaching for many, many years. My mother started out as a kindergarten teacher. That's a whole chapter of her life as well.
Because Hebrew and English
Because
was
of the
necessary.
Hebrew and English, and she started teaching
Sephardi.
in a Magen David Yeshiva in Brooklyn, New York, and she was there for about 36 years. She started 30. She started the early childhood education department in Magen David Yeshiva, and her work is still remembered and recognized. Now I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to go back to the presentation. Just a second, screen share. Just a minute. We're going to have time for questions and answers. I'm going to go into presenter mode. I just wanted to...
my line.
Okay, just a moment. Just a second. Let me go into presenter mode. Okay, just if you can, somebody can ping me that you see what's going on here. Okay, these were the bundles.
Canada.
Okay, here is my mother teaching English when she arrived in New York because she knew English and Hebrew. This is my beautiful mother today. This is my beautiful mother then. And I don't know if we have time. Maybe Lital can let me know if we have time to just see my father's video, or maybe we'll go for questions and answers. 1 second. Just a second. This is my mother. This was last year, A Living Legacy. My mother spoke at the Jaffa Institute.
No, this is a school.
And this was at the Zeitlin High School, I think 3 years ago. My niece teaches at Zeitlin, and my mother spoke to a group of 800 students about the Holocaust then. And we'll get to the questions and answers now. I want to just show my father's video. It's 2 minutes, and it has my mother in it as well, but I think that this is an inspirational story also. Just a minute, I'm going to show that video. Just a minute. Oop.
זה שיהודי תמיד נתון להשגחה עליונה. בזכות הרדיפות הוא הופך לעקשן, לוחם ומנתח, ללא פשרות, בכל גיל. וזה אגנס שווימר הוא דוגמה מצוינת לכך חשבו ימיה, כדי לספסף את הדוקטורט המיוחל. אגנס מודה את רעייתו ושמענו את סיפור חייהם המרתק, על ילד מהגטות שלו ויתר בחלום להיות דוקטור, עד שהשיג זאת. It was March 15, 1939, when the Germans came into Czechoslovakia. I was in my third year in medical school, and that deprived from being anymore going to that school. The sign was written, Jews are not any longer. I was born in Doha, graduated with very good marks, and I decided I'm going to learn medicine. When the Germans came, I was lucky because I spoke several languages. The main officer told the mayor that he leaves me an interpreter. After that, I came to America.
I was born not far from where he was, but we never knew each other.
I didn't know her, but I know all her friends, and I know the town that she lived. I knew her grandfather, I knew her father, I knew everyone there.
After the war, הוא מצא את הדוד שלי, הוא חי, הדוד אומר, אני חיה, הוא כתב לי מכתב, שהוא רוצה להתחתן איתי לפני שראיתי, שלחתי לו תמונה, לא מצא חן בעיניו, חשבנו לזה בשבילי. באתי וישבנו אותו הרכבת, אני ישבתי עליו, והוא לא ידע, אני ידעתי מיגור, וגם הוא הלך לגלות, וגם אני הלכתי.
So my wife there, so nice from my family, and she was already addicted.
Okay, I'm going to stop this video because everybody's telling me it's bad quality. I don't think we have times for questions and answers, so we'll skip that for now. I just wanted to end the presentation.
That's why I stayed alive.
This is why my mother stayed alive. This is my mother with some of her great-grandchildren, and this picture was taken a year and a half ago. There were 2 missing and 2 more were added to the clan. Thank you, God, for this. This is my mother's life and joy, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, and her daughters as well. My sister Miriam and I both live in Israel, and we're both very thankful that most of our kids are being raised in Jewish homes with tradition and religion. And these are our families today. Some of you know my daughters, Renee and Michelle, and my sister's family, my sister Miriam and Rabbi Israel Haber. This is my mother's happiness and joy, I think.
This is the payback for what they did to us.
Okay, so I'm glad that most of you could join us. And this is an important story that my mother shared.
And with this will keep on Israel and a place given to us by God, and to keep it and to save it and just fight for it.
And Mommy, what is your final message? What do you think that this should be taken, that we should never forget?
Well, everybody went through that has a chance to tell people not to let it happen again, because I don't know if people would allow it even. Here, and we are building, and we are happy to keep going and spreading and the good life, the good things in life.
Okay, so I'm just going to end this right now.
Speak.
You did great, Ma. I'm going to end this with now a refuah shlema to all those that are ill with this corona. I hope that this time will actually pass quickly and that we should all be healthy. And our message for tolerance and for never again will get through. And Mommy, thank you so much. And we appreciate your time. And I hope if one person learned something from this, or if you have any questions, you can text me, or you can Facebook my mother. You can find her, Agnes Schwimmer, and she'll be happy to answer your questions. And with that, we're ending this presentation. Is that okay, Lital? Are you with me?
And
Alex?
thank you, Adina and Debbie, for sharing the story with us. And thank you for everyone who joined.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Don't let it happen again. Just fight it wherever you can.
תודה רבה.
תודה רבה.
תודה.